Welcome back, everybody. So we are now at a Red Crescent Red Cross synthesis workshop, and we are going to run for about 2 hours, I am told. 2 hours from when we start. We've got quite a lot of things to cover. Just a quick introduction again. My name is Marcus Oxley, and I've been asked to help facilitate this session. So remember, I'm here to facilitate, not to lead. It's your session. I'm just here to facilitate that. We're going to start with a quick briefing by Sirac, who's going to just bring us up to speed and remind us of some of the initiatives that the Federation is doing around the kind of resilience, disaster risk reduction agenda. So we're going to have a quick update on that, about 15 minutes. But really what the main purpose of this workshop is to just give us a little bit of time to reflect on what we've heard downstairs over the last couple of days and just see what we think that means in terms of the relevancy to the work, to the programs, to the sectors that you're actually working in your everyday, day-to-day job. So we're going to just reflect a little bit about some of the critical issues that came out from the discussions. We're going to just remind ourselves of some of key initiatives that are going on within the wider organization. And then we're going to have a chance just to sit down in groups, probably around those 4 key presentations that we had downstairs, and just reflect, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean for what we have to do in terms of how we, evolve our thinking along? What does that mean for the programs that we're doing? And then we're going to do that in groups together and then play that back to each other. So that is a tall order in 2 hours, believe me. But we're going to have a go. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sirac, who's come across from the Federation in Geneva, and is going to talk about some of the initiatives that the Federation has been doing. So over to you, Sirac.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Sirac Tamasgen. I'm a resilience coordinator for Federation, based in Geneva, covering basically Africa and the MENA region. There is another colleague of mine covering Asia Pacific, the Americas, and also Europe region. I was asked actually to share about the roadmap to community resilience of the Federation initiative. Okay. I don't really think I need to go to the details of the definition of resilience, but I would like you at least to remember the basic essence, even though we come up with a different definition from different agencies, what resilience means. I would like you to remember 2 points only from the definition. One is, we call them the 4 pillars of resilience. The first one is anticipation. In any resilience work, I think it has been like since yesterday when people really talking about resilience building, and also this morning, I felt like I have nothing to talk about because most of the things have already been covered. But I just try to summarize actually. So whenever we talk about resilience building, the first question we need to ask is resilience against what? We are not just building resilience against everything. We have a limited capacity, we have limited resource, we have limited competence as well. So when you talk about resilience, the first question need to be asked, and you have to answer is resilience against what? There must be a specific risk, hazard or threat affecting or troubling the community that we're really going to build resilience against. So we need to anticipate. If there is a resilience project, you have to have a component within that project to help you anticipate the risk. before it materializes, before it happens, before it transforms into crisis. That is the difference between risk management and disaster management. When you talk about disaster management, you are managing the crisis. But when you talk about risk management, it is not yet happened. You are managing the probability of risk so that it will not really materialize into crisis. So you have to be able to anticipate the risk. Second, okay, we know the risk is coming. Are we prepared enough to be able to respond? Do we have the capacity to do that well ahead of time? So that is the second pillar. Third pillar, we have to cope and adapt. We are living in a dynamic situation, dynamic world where things are really changing so fast. Climate change is contributing to those changes. So how could we be able to adapt and live with the risk? If there is a risk which you cannot really avoid, you have to live with it. If you really have a very terrible wife or husband, difficult to divorce, you have to find your way how to live with the risk. You have to accommodate and compromise. That is living with the risk. I wish I could be able to share you some practical experience. In Sudan, I don't know if any of you knows Khartoum. In Khartoum, at the outskirts of Khartoum, where the two Niles meets the blue and the white Nile, there is an island called Tuti Island. Every year they are being affected by flood, but nobody dies, they don't lose any livelihood. And they have been rewarded, I think, by UNICDR in 2011 as a best resilience community. They don't need any help from anyone. They manage to cope in that challenging context. They know their risk, they build their own capacity, nobody tells them to do anything. They just naturally develop that capacity. In the other part of Khartoum, where there is a small flash flood, people are always crying, and the Federation launches DREF and Apple funding every year. It is a small crisis. They are not learning from those people. Leave place, and they are being affected with the small rain, not with the Nile River. People are not really learning. So that is the adaptation part. The last one is the recovery and the transformation part. How we can really build back better, and also how we can transform. If the pastoralists in Somalia, in Ethiopia, in Sudan, if their livelihood is entirely dependent on livestock, it is no more being a viable livelihood option now. It is being challenged by drought. Drought used to happen like once in every 10 years. Now it becomes every 2 years. So they don't really have enough time to properly rebuild their capacity to recover from the crisis. Before they recover from one drought, the other drought already affecting them. So how we can really transform these communities so that they will be more resilient. So those are the 4 pillars of resilience. The second one is the characteristics of resilience community. There was a research being done in 2010 and 2011, early 2011 by Federation, in 4 Asia-Pacific countries, disaster-prone countries. They were trying to find what are the common characteristics that cuts across different resilience communities. What are that unique characteristics of those vulnerable communities, but who could be able to manage the risk and remain resilient in their context? So they find out with these 6 characteristics of resilient communities. And I'm happy this morning, my colleague from Iranian Red Crescent, he was calling them dimensions. The Sustainable Livelihood Framework called them the Sustainable Livelihood Capitals. But for us, they are characteristics of resilience communities. One, any resilience community needs to be knowledgeable about the risk. They know their vulnerability level, they know the hazard they are facing, they know the limited capacities they are having, they know their gaps as well. So that they will try to enhance their capacity, use their existing capacity to reduce their vulnerability and they enhance their resilience. Hazard is a necessary condition for risk, but not sufficient condition. The hazard should meet vulnerable communities in order to progress into a crisis. So we are not only managing the hazard side, but also the vulnerability and lack of capacity side as well. So that knowledge should be there in the community. Second, a resilience community should be socially cohesive. If the community is divided, they are vulnerable. So there are the characteristics of resilience communities. They are socially cohesive, they are socially connected, they support each other. Let me tell you one example. In the border between Kenya and Ethiopia, there are these pastoralist community migrating usually whenever there is drought on the Kenya side, they migrate to Ethiopia side. Whenever there is a problem on the Ethiopia side, they migrate to Kenya side. And whenever there is a crisis also, they use to support each other. They call it Busa Gonnofa system, Busa Gonnofa. Busa Gonnofa system is a traditional social support system whereby during normal seasons, people contribute some resources. It could be cattle, it could be money, it could be other form of contribution. They contribute and keep some resources for those people who could be vulnerable when there is a critical, serious crisis or shocks. And they have been like, whenever there is drought, they use those resources to distribute those cattle for those vulnerable households so that they could be able to cope. Now, after years, that local capacity, local support, social support capacity has been replaced by NGO interventions. So now, that local contribution system is getting weaker because there are NGOs now, whenever there is a crisis, come to the community, distribute relief food aid. Are we putting communities in a more vulnerable situation, or are we making them better? The social support system are getting weaker, people are no more contributing resources during good time. Because they think Red Cross will come, NGOs will come to contribute. That is, we are making the community weaker, we are also making the community, the social support system weaker. The other one is has economic opportunities. If the person depends on one type of livelihood, it's really difficult to cope with difficult situation. I'm aware of the time concern as well. The other one is well-maintained infrastructure, can manage its natural resources, and well-connected, not only internally, but also with external organizations. Why resilient? I'm not really justifying and go to the details of that. Risks are increasing, vulnerabilities are increasing. If you see the figures, measured against the world population, 7.4 million people, around 65 million people are now displaced globally. Weather-related disasters are displaced 22.5 million people every year. We cannot be able to cope up with the growing humanitarian needs. The concern for Red Cross movement, Red Cross, Red Crescent movement, is not only addressing the current humanitarian needs of today, but how we can also reduce the increasing humanitarian needs for tomorrow. The other crisis, the other challenge is the silent disasters. A road accident is killing 1.2 million people every year. Non-communicable disease, they are really killing like 38 million people every year. Pandemics, in one minute every 30 seconds, more than 1 million children every 30 seconds dies of malaria. They are not attracting immediate attention. How do we then build resilience? We learned that there is no absolute resilience. Even the well-developed nations, they can't really reach 100% resilience. Impossible. It is a process need to be continuously developed. There is no also zero resilience. People have naturally, we talked this morning, that natural tendency of developing resilience by nature. We recognize that also communities are the first responders. Impact of disaster always remain at the local level. This has been reflected in the framework for community resilience in the key principles, how we can bridge the divide between relief, recovery, and the long-term development. So Federation has came up with two framework. The first one is IFRC framework for community resilience, a brief summary of the framework for community resilience. And then the second one, which was actually published last year, is the roadmap to community resilience, how we can operationalize the broader framework into step-by-step process to community resilience. Currently, we are piloting in 12 countries the roadmap to community resilience. I already gave to the workshop organizers the soft copy. You will get it all, the step-by-step approach. In this roadmap to community resilience, if you are really genuine and honest to build the community resilience, we have to change our role as Red Cross, Red Crescent from purely service delivery to 3 services. Our service needs to be completely changed. We are no longer, within the framework of resiliency building, we are not service provider as such. I'm not saying we don't really do service delivery, we have to do, but with the framework of resilience building, our work, the service we provide to the communities, accompanying them in their journey toward this resilience building, enable them and connect them. How do we connect? We cannot really address all cross-sectoral issues, but we try to really link them with the right institution. It could be government or non-government organization so that they can tap into those resources. The 4 stages of roadmap, this is the roadmap to resilience. The first stage is engage and connect with the national society, with the different local actors, with the community. The second stage is understanding risk and vulnerability. Based on that, we come up with the action plan. The third step is take action. The fourth step is learn from your experience, from your action. How does VCA, vulnerability risk assessment, vulnerability capacity assessment, related with the different sectoral tools? CBHFA, PASA use, FAST, food security and livelihood. I'm not going to explain that, but the first question, if you're going to the community with some defined sector areas in mind, go for the sectoral tools. If you do WASH quite well, keep on doing WASH quite well and bring resilient elements around it at the later stage. If you are good in food security, keep on doing that and bring the other elements around it. But if you don't have any predefined sector, go for holistic kind of assessment. Then my other point is the 1 billion coalition initiative. I think most of you must be aware of this. The 1 billion coalition initiative is like the partnering goal is using the full reach of our collective network as Red Cross, Red Crescent to maximize local opportunities and solutions. The scaling goal is at least one person in every household, every school or business, and every community take action, at least one action. And how do we measure it? At the end of the day, the target is to reach 1 billion people taking action to enhance their own and their community's resilience. How do we do that? Focus on priority risk, just define your risk, build on existing programs. There are some good examples mentioned this morning. Just build, identify which ones are really the good success we have achieved in terms of resilience. Then how we can really scale that up to benefit many communities. My last slide. The time is limited, but I'm trying. Anyway, reflect. Where are we standing now in terms of, 1, funding gaps? There is a bit of a dilemma within the Federation, and I would like to raise that as well here. In principle, Federation said every 10% of emergency response money should be allocated to disaster risk reduction. In practice, it hardly happened because most of our appeal are not funded 100%. And the first activity to be dropped is a DRR activity. The justification, the logic is, how do you keep money, you set money aside for DRR whenever there is an urgent food need for survival, for daily survival? If people are under desperate need of food today, how you can talk about tomorrow? Go to these drought-prone areas in Africa. How do you expect people not to cut trees for future resilience while they are really surviving today, while they don't know how to really feed their children today? So funding is important, but also it is good to reflect, do we really need huge fund to build resilience? Resilience is, you have to build resilience. No one can bring resilience to the community. It should be an inbuilt process from the community, from the inside out. How we can really nurture that capacity? Do we really need huge resource for that? I definitely agree that we need resources, but we can also do a lot without really significant resource. Second, timing. Most of the time, we stay in the community 2 years, 3 years. Maximum, if you get the longest project, is 5 years. Most research shows if you're really serious about building resilience, it takes at least 10 years commitment. Are we ready? How do we really address that? Third point, are we ready for the community to lead? If you are serious about community resilience building, the community is the one who should be at the forefront, who will lead their process. If you want your child, how do you teach your child to walk? You ask him, you just stand further, you ask him to walk. He might be falling, but he still practice to learn. Unless we give that chance to the community, they cannot be resilient. Let me ask you one question. We have 2 hands. Huh? Is there any left-handed person? Left-handed person. Okay, let me ask. Nahal, which hand is more stronger? From the left hand. For the right-hand person, which one is more stronger? Why do you think? You give a chance to practice. That practice makes it stronger. That is how we build community resilience. Let them practice and support them so that they will be in the lead. The other point, are we ready to change our mindset to structure? We have been talking cross-sectoral approach. But our system in every organization, even at the federation level, we are sectorally, structurally, we are still sectorally divided. That is the reality. Go to the government, they are sectorally divided. How we can really ensure that cross-sectoral approach? It's really realistic. Are we ready to make that mindset? Which ones are our best resilience, DRR experience, where we can really build on? We have to identify, we cannot really build everything. We can do whatever we can do best, but for the others, we need to really create or connect with the other actors. The last one is, are we coordinating well among ourselves and with others? We say we have to really coordinate and link with the others, but first we have to start from internally to coordinate well and support each other to promote resilience building. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Sirak. So clearly the Federation is working on a lot of tools, approaches, methodologies, roadmaps. Hopefully some of you will have heard about that and using some of those tools. So I guess the question we now kind of need to lead into is whether we feel that the tools, approaches, the methodologies that we're currently using, whether we feel that really these are the most relevant, appropriate tools for you within the MENA region, and whether these tools and approaches are really connecting with some of those issues, some of those good practices, some of those challenges that we've just been hearing about over the last couple of days. So, you know, do we feel that kind of what is being developed by the organization and the various tools that we have, do we think they are relevant, appropriate to what we've just been hearing about the last couple of days? And then, you know, so I think we can have a little bit of a general thoughts, reflections on that. Maybe some questions back to Sirak for those of you who are using these tools or maybe want to use these tools. And then we'll have a little bit of chance just to get together in groups and have a little bit more kind of discussion with yourselves about where you think what some of the critical issues are, what is it we need to be able to deliver on the programs, on the sectors that we're working on. You know, what does resilience and what we're understanding of resilience over the last few days, what does that actually mean for you who actually have to deliver this? But also a bit of a change in approach I hear there. This is about facilitating, about supporting, about nurturing. You know, it's an empowering process. And that empowering process, it is a bit of a different change in mindset. You know, we're not going to build resilience through some top-down directive, but we are going to try to support and engage and nurture and strengthen communities that are already having to grapple with these issues because that's the reality for them. So let's just see if who wants to kind of just make some thoughts, observations, just listening to what the wider organisation is doing, but also mindful of the challenges in your regions. And I think there's been some great questions being asked over the last couple of days, particularly around this conflict and insecurity issue. They're particularly mindful of the drivers that we're dealing with in the MENA region. So let's just kind of open that up a bit, have a little bit of share a few ideas. There's no, it's an open discussion really, and just chance to reflect a little bit on what we've heard over the last couple of days. Yeah, please.
Hi, everyone. So for us, it was really useful for this 2 days, especially sharing experience with other national societies and other from different actors. So it's not only about what we are doing as a movement. So, I will start from the last point. It's by Sirac. It is important to speak about our resilience as a national societies and share our information and knowledge. So what we found out, it's not only today. It's really mainly from most of the workshops that we are attending. There's really good practice and good lesson learned, but it's not translated into practice with other national societies. It's not only that, it's even within the same national societies. So for us, this is really one of the big challenges. And yes, we are looking at the resilience in a very big pictures. And thanks, for your point, it's very important what we need from the resilience, because everyone's speaking about the resilience. So what you really need to change from the resilience. And here I will go to the topic about the conflict-sensitive area, which is until now, and what we heard on the discussion, even with UN and at Sunday Framework and the others, they don't want to include the disaster risk reduction in the conflict-sensitive area, which is for us as a national society, as a Lebanese Red Cross, from day one, when we start the DRR, we are working in a conflict-sensitive areas, and we are working as a DRR, so the thing that we are speaking about it now, we are doing that since 5 years, maybe 6 years. Because this is the reality. Yes, in Lebanon, we do have the man-made hazard and we have the natural hazard, but the most important and the relevant thing for the people, it is the man-made hazard. When you address this, the people, they are happy to listen for the natural hazard. But you cannot speak about something, it may happen, it may not, in the near future, and there's things, it's happening every day, and they are suffering every day, and you say, sorry, we are not planning to reduce the risks. You can keep dying every day. We are not caring about you because, sorry, Sunday from work and disaster risk reduction, we are not focusing on that. So as a Lebanese Red Cross, we took that decision and we start working on that. We had a lot of lesson learned and good practice, which is we can share it. And for us, it's really not that difficult. Disaster risk reduction work in a conflict-sensitive area, it's not that difficult. And we are not saying we need to go and do risk reduction under the fires. No, this is not the case. So this is, you need to do it. It's easier after the conflict, but during the conflict, it's not really like an everyday conflict. For us, during that time, just build the capacity for these people. It's simple things. Some first aid training, some first aid equipment, link them to the response team, and then you can save their life. And from here, they start to be resilient. They start to learn. They start to engage. You start to take all the lessons learned. Then, when the war or when the conflict ends, and this is what we've done in Tripoli and Jabal Mahsen and Bab Tibbani, and this is a question that I asked the UN Habitat about collecting information from Bab Tibbani. I don't think that it was that easy to collect all this information and engage with this community because we knew how difficult it is. So again, what's always going on the presentation and sharing information and sharing experience, it's not always reflecting the reality. So we will not learn like this. We are always like to present ourselves in a very good pictures, and we don't want to say where we fail, that we can learn from each other. So it will not help. Again, if you go down to the communities, so for us, the resilience in the conflict-sensitive areas, it's for these people. So we are a company, we are enabling them, we are connecting them to the authorities by building their capacities, by linking them to the response plan, by linking the municipality to the governorate, to the national response plan. Is exactly how our panel present with the local authorities. So yes, this work can create the safer access to the Red Cross and to the movement and to the humanitarian actors. So why? Same example in Jabal Mahsen and Bab Tibbani. This conflict stayed for 7 years. And it's not always the Red Cross were able to respond in a good time. So it's mean people, they was suffering and they was dying because we cannot respond in a good time. So all what they need is people, basic first aid training, basic equipment, and link them to the capacity existing within their community, like how you can engage with this group of people. If you're stuck, how you can open the pharmacy and take the equipment, and then you can solve it out. How you can open the supermarket, take the food, and then you can solve it out. And this is one of our lessons learned in 2006 war, and this is what we done. And I was one of the people leading in the South on this war. So for us, I mean, this is part of the resilience. You are empowering the community. And again, if you are not responding to these people in a good time, they already knew about it because it was part of the awareness, part of the trainings. You engage them, you empower them. So you will not kill your safer access when you respond later or after the conflict. They will say, no, the Red Cross, they are bad people. We called them and no one helped us and our people die. So there's a lot we can speak about it, but it's just like because of the time, and I'm happy to go more.
Okay, let's take a few more comments, reflections, questions, and then maybe Sirak can provide some thoughts back on there. Just yeah, gentleman over there.
Hello. Okay, I would like to. Maybe a quick introduction as well, just for people who I'm my name is Atta in Netherlands Red Cross. Thank you. And I want to refer to, thanks Iraq, and I want to refer to the presentation by Palestine Red Crescent and Katie, which relates to the driving factors or the root or the root causes of conflict. But we as a Red Cross movement, if you see any conflicting scenario in the globe, and if you example, so we are more doing reactive based humanitarian assistance in the ground level, on the grassroots levels, by responding to the needs and building capacities and resilience of the communities. But how much of a role as a Red Cross movement, which is not, I think, it's not mandated to us to go and hit the root cause which is creating conflict. If you take example of Pakistan, Afghanistan, Somalia, South Sudan, Lebanon, Palestine, Libya, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, many conflicting environments. So all root causes, if you see behind the scene, is more or less political and economical gains and all this. But as a movement, as a way forward, we cannot have a stake in that as such to be proactively engaging that root cause plus in parallel building the capacity and resilience of the communities. So this has to be thought because we have to address the root causes, right? So if you see globally, what is the root cause of, yes, it's resources, but how we as Red Cross movement, let's say in MENA, can deal this. So it's just...
I mean, yes.
Okay, very challenging question there, but I'm sure we'll get some replies from the Red Cross on thoughts on that. But let's keep going. Let's get some of the issues out here, and then we can take it from there. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to add also to what Katie Peters mentioned this morning about, I think there was a quote about including more non-state actors into DRR, especially in conflict-sensitive settings. And I think this is a good point, because there is an issue with the perception of DRR in conflict settings. I think we all agree that if we respond in times of crisis, we have to deal as a humanitarian actor with all sides. So this means also, I will phrase it now like this, the bad guys. I think DRR, this is for a lot of people, developmental issue. So we work with community organizations, we work with more, let's say, with the perception that we don't maybe include all the stakeholders, the non-state stakeholders, but especially in conflict settings, the example also of Lebanon, you deal with communities where you also deal with fighters, for example, and you have to include them into these approaches and into this long-term work in order to work with the community and in order to engage all of the stakeholders in the community. And I think this is why it's great that we are starting to really talk about DRR and long-term engagement in protected crisis and in conflict-affected communities. Because first of all, we have to also change our mind, I think, regarding the approach and bringing in developmental issues into crisis-affected communities or, let's say, work.
Okay, very good. I don't know what the answers are to by the way, I'm just facilitating, so let's just get some of the issues out and then we can break out into groups and have a few thoughts about what we can do. Yeah, over there.
Well, I think you were also mentioning how, breaking down the silos, and we need to start in Geneva, IFRC, ICRC, so the different departments need to actually learn from each other. And I think when I look at some of the tools that are developed within DRR, I often wish that they had sort of come by my table prior to being published, because there's so many ways that we could mainstream or integrate protection, psychosocial well-being into the work that you're doing, so that you are addressing not just material environment, but also social ecology and human capacity, which is the definition of well-being at the end of the day. And so I think we need to start in our own backyards, look at the tools we have. I mean, we talk about integration with our partners, but we are not integrated in our own heads and in our own institutions. So we need to walk the talk, and I'm sorry, but that's where it starts. And we're failing to do so. And by failing to do so, you are failing to save and protect lives. And so, yeah, sorry. That's my main point.
Okay, some very challenging. Just keep saying who your name is, just because I'm sure we all could all just be beneficial. Just to remind.
I would like to take the opportunity directly to continue to this. And first of all,
quick introduction.
Yeah, my name is Rico, part of this advisory group and resilience group within the headquarters of German Red Cross. And first of all, my appreciation, it's first time for me to be in this region, and what I was reading on the title, Falling Behind, it's the opposite what I've learned in the last 2 days. It's you are running ahead. So there are many activities, what I've learned from your organizations, where you work with communities already in an approach which, is it either in a crisis situation or in the urban context, where you are steps ahead to some other national societies. So, but yeah, the challenge is there, and what I've learned, it's the complexity, and what was working in one context and the experience you gained there, it's quite a challenge to transfer it to another context, and it needs always to be contextualized. But coming back to the connection, we have our definition in German Red Cross where we say resilience starts, first of all, at the individual level. For us as the humanitarian aid workers, we need to be, yes, psychosocial support is something we established at German Red Cross now for our staff, as we recognized how important it is to have a resilient aid worker, a resilient member in the community, to be able to contribute, and this is the next level, to have a resilient organization. Only with a resilient organization we are able to build up a resilient community. And we are in this more challenging setup to say it's not only an organization, it's 191 national societies which are under an umbrella organization. And to find the resilience in there, that's quite a challenge. And is it within one cell or is it in the big? That's quite a big ambition what we have in this paradigm shift to say away from the classical service provider toward to be an enabler, facilitator, and guide for a community. I have my and now we are in our circle, I have my critical points also where I say, how do we define it? It was good to have the definition today, how we define community. But we also need to be careful not to expect too much of communities and not to be too idealistic what communities can do. You say that a time of 10 years. In my own community, I left Berlin 5 years ago. I came back and the community within 5 years completely changed. So what are communities able to do? How are communities structured? And I must say, I really love the roadmap to community resilience and the collection of all the tools. But I also raise the question mark to say, don't be too ambitious what you expect by communities, and don't use it as an excuse that we can step back to say, no, that's now community's role, community responsibility. We are just there to facilitate, but now it's their responsibility. Thank you.
Okay, some great comments here, and also the importance there about, being really realistic and expectations of what we can't do as an organization in what is a big problem here. But some critical comments there about how do we capture the learning, how do we make sure we embed that, share that, make sure that becomes the norm. How do we develop these tools? Like many of you, I feel when I listen to this as somebody from outside the region, and there was that discussion today about conflict was in the Sendai framework, and then for political reasons it got negotiated out of the framework. And clearly when you're working in this region, the reality is that's what people are dealing with. So, how appropriate is that Sendai framework to the reality here? I mean, it isn't reflecting that local realities, and the tools have to reflect those local realities to be appropriate, to really add value to this. And so the question of who is involved in who's developing these tools, and how do we make sure that the expertise and knowledge within this region, who are probably at the forefront of understanding what resilience and disaster prevention means in an area of conflict insecurity, you should be leading the way on this. You should be showing the rest of the world where the limits and boundaries are, what the critical challenges are. So I think there's a lot of richness that we heard downstairs in terms of what is being done in the practical realities that people are having to live in this region. So it's there's a tremendous amount going on. So let's not Let's not forget that. Do you want to say a few words on this, and then maybe we can get into smaller groups, and sometimes it's easier for people to speak together a bit in a smaller group, and then we can play that back a bit to each other. So, yeah.
Thank you, but like I can't promise I can really give you kind of like adequate answer. I prefer to start from what you mentioned about the development of the tools, the guidance, etc. As much as possible, I think most of the tools, when they were developed, most of the guidance, still within the Federation, we still have that mindset of like we are dealing with natural disaster. So most of the tools, most of the guidance are oriented towards addressing natural related crises and the shocks. Now it is for the first time we are actually revising VCA after 18 years of use. And one of the pathway we introduced, I don't know how many of you have seen the draft VCA website. We launched the draft VCA website. And one of the pathways is the conflict pathway. How we can adapt VCA to the conflict setting. That's one path. The other one is how we can also adapt VCA to fit into urban context. When you talk about mapping in the traditional setting, we have the rural areas in mind whereby you use a flip chart to draw the community. But in the urban setting, people are using this high-rise building. How do you map it? We don't really have adequate tools to capture that unique characteristics in the urban areas. So for the urban pathways, for the conflict pathways, I was asking Kasim, can this region lead that process? We are happy, it is open actually. If you can give me like name of some few.
Because I need it for the translation.
Okay. Some few people, if I can get really the name of some few people who would like to commit their time to develop that pathways, I would be really more than happy. That's one point. The other one, okay, we shall not be also expect from the community. The community capacity is limited. Yes, but we have to also strike the balance where we can really support the community. For any resilience, there is a limit. We have been discussing this morning as well. Even yesterday, somebody was mentioning, even the, how do you call it, the hospitality, the generosity of the host community is fading away. We are talking about donors now, donors fatigue in fundraising. We keep on going to the same donors talking about crisis. And we say, when is this going to end? So we have to really keep that balance where the community can survive by its own and where we can really support that process without really a kind of like over-expecting from the community. We know how much they can deliver, but before they reach that limiting, tense, break-even point, I think we have to really be careful. For me, if you ask me, where is the last margin threshold for resilience, especially in the agricultural context, rural context, if people desperately decide to sell their seeds for the next season, to buy some critical stuff now, to get some money to send their children for a medication, for treatment, that is a threshold point. Before selling their seed, before selling their productive livelihood, we have to step in. That is the limit they can stretch. So I think the matter of really balancing that. The other point is like, we have already good foundation. We call it, I think somebody was also mentioning, source of resilience. These people are not new for conflict. Drought is not new for Africa. People have been surviving for centuries. But now it becomes more severe, more frequent. So how we can strengthen that source of resilience? First, we need to learn what are the local sources of resilience. And we need to really strengthen and build on those sources of resilience. We cannot just come in and come up with some predefined activities and try to implement. So that is the kind of thing, and I really would like to see in this discussion how we can now, this is a reality, how we can operate in this reality, how we can really do whatever we are doing now in a better way so that we can contribute for resilience community. Thank you.
Okay. Let's now get you to do some work. We're going to have a go at doing a bit of group work. It sometimes helps just for people to split up into smaller groups. You've all listened to what's been happening over the last 2 days. We've just had shared some ideas about some of the gaps, some of the challenges that we're facing, not least that a lot of these tools have developed out of a kind of a natural disasters kind of thinking, which, you know, clearly in this region, the issues are very, very different. So let's just kind of get together in small groups and think about what are practical things that we can do, what we think the top 3 issues would be that we think we can do to make sure that the issues that are reflected in this MENA region are actually brought into those. What do we have to do to our tools? Are there additional things that we need to do? Do we need to modify the VCA? Is this kind of roadmap methodology, does it fit with that reality? Where can we go in terms of addressing underlying causes when we've got a mandate which is trying to be neutral? You know, what are some of the critical issues here that we need to be surfacing? And hopefully in so doing, we can start to identify areas that we need, that we think within this region we can work on, we can prioritize, and these are the things that will help lead the way in when we're talking about resilience in conflict areas, when we're talking about how do we bring multiple risks where we've got natural disasters interplaying with conflict, interplaying with economic shocks, interplaying with political upheaval. You know, how do we work in that kind of dynamic? So you have the answers. You know, it's the people that are at the front line dealing with this have those answers. So that needs to come back to the organisation. So let's have a go if we can just capture a little bit of what we're thinking over the last couple of days. What we're suggesting is that you get into those 4 groups that we had the panel discussions on. So if you remember, there was one on about cross-sectoral integration. There was one on the multiple risks and the Lebanese experience, the particular dynamics here. There was one on this issues of conflict and violence that we heard earlier this morning. And then there was a discussion about particular challenges in urban contexts, cities, that we heard later on. So there's 4 groups there, so I'm kind of hoping that we will, you know, each of will be able to connect with one of those 4 groups, and everybody doesn't all end up in one single group in Lebanon or whatever. But let's see how that goes. And if we need to rejiggle a bit, come on, let's be flexible. We've not got a lot of time. But, you know, start to identify what you think some of the gaps are. Start to identify some of the actions that we need to do to make sure these tools are appropriate, whether it's modifying the VCA or whatever. And really, you know, just headline some critical issues. There's enough here to have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge in this group. So let's just go into, shall we say, the 4 corners, basically. So shall we have sectoral integration around here, cross-sector integration in that corner. Down at that bottom corner, let's have the Lebanese multiple risks, the scales, the partners, non-state actors. There was a lot of discussions about this whole of society approach, which I totally agree with, but it's not easy doing whole of society approach, particularly when we've got our own mandates. In that corner, let's have the conflicts and violence. Group a few chairs together. What does this mean for our tools, our methodologies, our approaches? How far can we go down this path? And let's have this one here around the cities. Okay, so cities, conflict, violence, Lebanese, particularly the Lebanese experiences and what that means for the learning that needs to be shared back into the organisation, and then the sectoral integration there. So we'll give ourselves till about 1:45, right? You haven't got long, so just get the headlines out, you know, get some of the headlines out, see if you can get some consensus. We'll call you back at about 1:45, 10:45. You need somebody in the group to be able to capture and feed back. So somebody has to facilitate this within your group, just to feed back to the plenary. Okay? I've been told 1:30, so let's keep moving. I can see this is a region that is not short of ideas and plenty of things to talk about, so I will take that as an encouraging, positive sign. So, okay, we seem to have 3 groups out of the 4 groups, but never mind. I'm sure there was a dual mandated group there. Let's get some feedback now from each of the groups. So let's listen to what each of the groups had to say, and then we can have a bit of a discussion between ourselves, see if there's any areas of commonality coming through, see where the differences are, see where some of the critical gaps are, see what we think some of the priority actions are that we need going forward. So who wants to be brave and feedback first? And introduce your theme of your group as well as... Oh, very good, Arno, very good, well done.
So the theme of our group is conflict and violence. And we identified 4 priority needs there. First, we need practical examples of DRR in conflict contexts in order to feed them into strategy, policy papers, and international fora. Also to reach our donors in this way, to fund these kind of activities also in settings of conflict. And it has been observed that especially examples of this region and of conflict settings are rare in the literature and surrounding DRR. Second point, we should learn from other organizations' experience working in risk reduction resilience in this region, especially in conflict contexts. And probably the conference could not attract enough of these actors as we wished or initially planned. But it would have been an added value, to have more of these other actors, other NGOs on board to report on their experiences. But we have some alliances here in the movement, especially with the Netherlands Red Cross, the Partnership for Resilience, where there were some of these experience coming out from non-movement organizations. Then third, that we are lacking somehow frameworks how we can operate in conflict settings as partners, partnering national societies, so PNS and host national societies, sometimes alongside or with facilitation of ICRC, but I'm not talking of ICRC, but really about the national societies who do the community-based work. And hereby I'm thinking of contexts where, let's say we were thinking where it's difficult to access, where it's dangerous to access for volunteers, and where our volunteers need to be equipped with a certain skill set that is maybe not needed in peaceful contexts. And maybe we should also identify very talented volunteers to work in these settings, because any let's say misbehavior can jeopardize the operation. So we need to work on these frameworks, and I think it's up to us, national societies, to come up with this together, to work on modes how to be better protected, how to have volunteers better protected, and how to facilitate their access. And the fourth one was need for advocacy for funding resilience programming towards donors in general, that all of our movement components should be active in this and should play a role. And we are 192 national societies plus federation plus ICRC, so this together is a big voice.
Okay, fantastic. Some great ideas there, some practical examples needed, how we learn from others within the region. We're not on our own in this. Frameworks to operationalize this, and also frameworks and guidance for our own staff And then advocacy. We need to, we need the resources, we need the enablers from our partners, from our donors. So very good. Great, well done. Thank you. Okay, we can pick this up in conversations later, but let's get the feedback on the table, and then we can talk it through a bit more. So who wants to go next? Okay.
Hi. Our group had the topic of sectoral integration and urban settings, but we mainly focused on sectoral integration. So we talked about very different aspects that are connected, but could also be very bigger topics on their own. So I'm trying to just put them out there. Yeah. So in terms of this sectoral integration, I think every national society is very well aware and also proud of what it is doing, and we as a movement are proud of what we are doing, but are at the same time very well aware if we would integrate our work better within each national society and as a movement as a whole, that we could achieve a lot more. But then we wandered off into different aspects. So one, and of course, looking at our work in terms of resilience and also looking at the roadmap to resilience, it was thought as to be beneficial if this roadmap could be adapted to each region, as it is very different, and different aspects have to be considered. Not all, of course, but there's very specificities and peculiarities to each region that change the way of working or the angle of which we look at the work. Then there was also the question raised as to, that the rate of the development of new tools and publications from federation or the movement might be a lot faster than the actual work on the ground. So if there is new tools, how are the old ones being evaluated? What is being used as a base to create and establish new tools? And a recommendation that came out of the group was more to really take stock and look at case studies from the different countries, the national societies. What are the success stories, and what is really different? What is different from the older school DRR approaches and activities, and what has changed to the buzzword resilience activities? What is the change? Why do we need to change the tool? And where is it integrated and where is it not integrated, to really showcase also that an integrated approach makes more sense. So to really use what is being done to improve tools and translate it into practice, make it more useful. Then also we said we talked a bit more, and this is more also where we ended on the community-based approach. Why do we talk about community-based WASH, community-based health, community-based PSP? Why don't we just talk about community-based and all the different things that come along as a whole? There is tools for holistic tools to approach a community, everything that goes along with it. But this is, again, national society and movement as a whole to use this. And then we also talked about a little bit more specifically about protection, and that it would be useful to have a sort of induction course for volunteers and staff, for those that are directly in contact with the beneficiaries and the communities, first of all, but could be useful to all Red Cross, Red Crescent people, of course, on more a crash course on do no harm. How do I approach a community or a beneficiary? Like very basic PSP skills, or very basic to familiarize the people that are in contact with the beneficiaries of the concepts of dignity, on how to communicate with someone, which then also, of course, means maybe knowing more about referral what is my own organization doing in a different field? Where can I just not just say, sorry, I don't know, but actually my organization is also working here in field of health if you need help. So very, different aspects out there, but I think some good reflections on what would be useful for the movement.
Again, excellent there. So the things that I just got headlines there were things about the importance about better integration across both the national societies and the broader movement. So, how we as a group movement work better together. The importance about making sure the roadmap is relevant, we adapt it, it's relevant to the context in which we're trying to apply it in. The importance about developing that our tools and our methodologies are often ahead of our practice. And we need to, as much as we invest in the tools, we need to invest in the practice as well. And more importantly, we need to learn from the practice and what worked and what didn't work to help inform the development of the next generation of tools. We're often good at banging out the tools and the policies and the methodologies, but, not a great deal changes at the grassroots level often. So a bit of getting the horse before the cart, so to speak. There was issues around this better harmonisation, if you like, of community-based approaches and just kind of understanding what's already been done within the different sectors, maybe what the overlaps are, what some of the significant, so a better harmonisation, deduplication, if that's the right word, I don't know. And then a specific issue around protection issues. What does do no harm mean in terms of programming, in terms of our own staff, the way that we approach our work? And again, I think that's a highly relevant issue when we're working in these areas where there's such tensions and insecurities and political sensitivities. So I think some very, very relevant comments there. Okay, let's go to the last group, and then we can throw this open and just see if we can kind of make sense and a bit of a way forward.
Okay, last group, it was about Lebanon. So we'll speak about three phases, like it's one about national, regional, and the local level. So based on the discussion, and again, it will not be really only about Lebanon, we try to make it in the way to influence and share experience with other national societies to keep everyone happy. So, to learn from each other. Sure, we always learn from each other. Because of that, we are here. For us, we see it should be, in order to influence this work and the disaster risk reduction, it's very important to have clear mandate within the national society, within the national response plan, and within the government, what the national society is doing in order to have your idea before you go and approach anyone. Because it's like an added value, this is a power, and this is how you can negotiate within all the levels. Second, it's very important for the national society to be present in all the levels. So it will not work if you are working and empowering the community, engaging with the community, and you are not present in the regional level and the national level. Because in the local level, you need the power from the region and you need the power from the national to make things work, and we can give some examples as we go through our work. So one, it's the added value and the plus for the Lebanese Red Cross. I mean, we have clear mandate within the Lebanese government, and it's within the national response plan. Yes, it is still draft, but with this, it's something we are putting in the table that we negotiate with. And it's very important when you go to present the national society, it's not you are going to present department or programs. This is one of the lessons learned, because at the end, the national society, it's not about emergency medical service or disaster management unit or disaster risk reduction or medical social or youth or blood bank. It's about all of them together. And this is the mandate for the national society, and it can give more power for the national society within the community, and here how you can create the resilience by empowering the community with all the needs. So how we find the approach, it's really like bottom up and up bottom. And what we found it's really working based on our experience when we start engage with the local authorities and on the governorate level. Why? I will give examples. So there's a lot of meetings taking place about resilience, empowering, etc., but everything still on the same table. The government, they were not able to translate it down to the field level. And here it was showing different when the Red Cross engaging more with the local authorities and where we are not engaging with the local authority. We still, as a Red Cross, working with all the local authority, but not community-based work within all of them. Just, to make it clear. So, and because we start to be good on community-based work, so through participatory approach with all of them. So one of example in SIDA, for example, when we start with them, the approach it was, we had requests from Prime Minister Office through the UNDP, we need to have earthquake plan in SIDA Governorate. Near SIDA Governorate. So our question, why near SIDA Governorate? Because they say it's more close to us, it's more easy, but again, guys, this is not the aim. So we play the role of the facilitator without taking their role, but it was like to empower them. So the question was, what's your aim from this? It's like to practice our role on the National Response Plan and to empower the communities, and good. So what was your selection criteria? You cannot start with all the city. It's really big and it's huge and you will fail. So just drop it down, take all the lesson learned, then you move step after that. Then they like the idea. They bring them up. So where's the most vulnerable area in SIDA? So it was clearly showing SIDA Old City. Why? Because it's like old building, close to the seaside, etc., etc. Then good. Then who's the key actors and who's the key players here within this? So then they start to give names for all the local actors and for all the local NGOs. Then the municipality was not present during that meetings, and it was clear it will not work if the municipality it was not taking part of this. And then we took our role. Look, as a Red Cross, we can support you. We can go down to the community. We can go through this local institution, and let's to call a meeting. And we prefer for this meeting to take place at the municipality, not as a governorate, for the municipality to feel the ownership. Then we invite everyone to the municipalities from the local institution. We brief the municipality and the governor on that, and each one presents their roles. So we present what's the role of everyone on the national level and the role of the local institution. Then we ask them where the most vulnerable area within SIDA Old City. Then they choose two sectors, because again, SIDA Old City, it's big, and we cannot take it all together. We will fail. So we start together with them. We gave them awareness, we gave them training, we gave them equipment, and they start, the first responder team within the community, they start to take place in the meeting, at the governorate meeting, at the same table with all the big actors, because they are the first responder. But for us, how it starts? It's an idea. They spoke about it, and then we facilitate it, and then it's working. So why? Because we knew what they want, we knew where they are going, and we knew that the willing is there. So same example, make sure everything speak here, we stay here. So, so same example with the North Governorate. He don't give shit about it. So again, we try, and so we work hard there, and we try to push as much as we can. But the municipalities, they don't care about it. The governor don't care about it. We were able to do nothing within the governorate level and the municipality level. But we were able to empower the community themselves through the institution, but we were not able to link it to the authorities. But we done very good jobs there. So this is showing again, even if there's no willing from the government, but there's willing from the local institution, you can still do the change on that. But this is again, you need to understand the country profile or the city profile. And here this is very important to link with the local branches for the national societies themselves, because they knew the community more than how we know as a headquarters. And here you need to choose the senior volunteers, not the junior volunteers, to have the acceptance within the community, especially on the first meeting and when you need to engage with them. Again, community-based work, it should be clear and understood by all the national society, which is not the case everywhere, even in Lebanon. And this is what we are doing now. We are trying to do more advocacy on the community-based work. So it's mean all of us, we can have the same approach when we are entering the communities. And now we already start to doing that, and we already start to pilot it in some of the area. We are not taking it on the national level, because again, it's like we are changing the cultures, even within the same national society. But where most of the national society fail, and they didn't see quick win, when they are putting really, we need to change it on the national level. I mean, there's no way. You need to start somewhere. And from there, take all the lesson learned, and you start after that to go up. And then you can use this lesson learned as the best practice, put it on the table, and from there you can do that change. And it's always what we found out when we start, even in tier, when we gave the good example about Union of Tier Municipality, when we start the pilot together, at the beginning, it was not that easy. At the beginning, the Union of Municipalities, they was afraid that if the Lebanese Red Cross will take all the spot on that. So, and again, for them, they was, so, I mean, it was really very careful at the beginning. Even the scout, I mean, they do some ambulance service, and they are very present. For them, it was a bit sensitive at the beginning, because everyone need to keep and have good image. So for us, it was clear that the Red Cross is not here to take your role. So the Red Cross, we are coming here together to learn from each other and to empower each other. And who will benefit at the end is the community. And at the end, what we need to present it, we can present it as a group. We done this to this community. So again, it's not really that easy. You can just go and accept and things go. There's really a lot behind it. And again, even in tier itself, with this good example, even we fail in some of the other community, and it's really depend on the persons. If you have the mayors that he's not willing and he don't have the interest, I mean, we cannot do any change on that. And thank you.
Okay, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to summarize all that one. Apart from this is, bringing about these changes it's complex. And it requires actions both, it's recognizing that different actors have different roles and responsibilities at different institutional scales. So at national level, governments often have the responsibility for laws and legislations and policies. But those are only as good as they are actually applied and implemented at the local level. And that's where local authorities and local communities and local actors have responsibilities for implementation and coordination and those. So different responsibilities, different actors, different scales, national, regional, local. And to get the changes that we want, yes, it's about the advocacy and clarity on mandates at the national level, but it's also about creating the engagement, the demand, the awareness at the local level. It's about the push and the pull. It's about the top down and the bottom up. And that's complicated. That's complex, but to get the changes we want, it won't just come about through reforms in policies. It's about changing practice. It's about changing culture. It's about changing, and this is where good examples can illustrate the way. Governments can feel quite threatened by this empowering idea. Often we think that empowering is it's a zero-sum game. If I empower the communities, I'm going to disempower myself. Rather than seeing this is something that we can achieve together that we can't achieve individually. But we have to model the way. We have to have the demonstrator projects. We have to have the pathfinders. And that's why showing good practice and sharing good practice, capturing good practice is so important, and using that to show our partners, to show our donors, to show where real progress can be made. So I think you're living the experience there, and it comes out very much, through that authority of experience that you've had. But it's a holistic approach to bring about these changes, and I think that's clear from the Lebanese experience here. So Okay, so some excellent points there. So let's just, lots of ideas and suggestions and hard experiences about where we go forward with that. I don't know whether people within the, the national societies, what their thoughts, reflections are on hearing all that. How do we take this forward? I guess as a facilitator, I'm saying that there's a richness in all this and some clear ideas and suggestions from the different groups, but somebody help me here to understand how this can be taken forward.
Yeah, so the next step is basically the report that Chris is working on right now. So he was busy summarizing all this for the last 2 days and also this session now. There is video coverage of all the panels and the keynote speeches and also of this discussion, and yeah, we will share all this with you. Say it again.
There's also the audio recording they can access online. We can share the links with everyone.
Yeah.
PowerPoints, I'm not sure about it. I'll see if I can have all the PowerPoints displayed throughout the conference, but I can't promise. I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, and we need a bit of patience, so the report will be ready by end of April. Yeah.
Some general thoughts, reflections here, Siraj? Yep.
I think like sometimes when you have such kind of conferences, there are so many issues coming up.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we don't really implement much. And if we are going to meet after a year, we are going to end up like discussing the same thing, the same issue. Mm-hmm. At least I would like to see if you can come up with some concrete action. For example, Morocco, Red Crescent. From this, based on this discussion, what do you do when you go back differently? Is there a possibility to share that lessons, those actions with us? I think there are two critical points which I learned actually since the discussion we had yesterday. There are two areas I can summarize. The roadmap to community resilience, it is basically mainly focusing at the community level. But since yesterday, I think there are issues coming up again and again, the institutional resilience part. We don't have yet a tool or a plan. In fact, we have these branch assessment tools, BOCA, OCAC, the branch capacity assessment tools to strengthen the national society's branch. But that is slightly different when you think of resilience building. Do the national society could be able to provide now enabling services, accompanying services, connecting services? What are the guidance? We are not yet there, but it's really important. How do you expect the national societies to strengthen community resilience if the national society by itself is struggling to become resilient itself? So maybe if you can think of like some few activity, few action in terms of institutional resilience strengthening, as well as community resilience building. 2-3 actions and what support. I think Arno indicated that we need to document our experience, DRR experience. Who will take that action? Can you agree? I don't know, it's really important. That is a stepping stone where we start if you want to replicate it. Who will do that? Can we discuss some concrete like 3-4 action points, not really many. If we can agree on that, it would be, I think, great. Thank you.
I think we cannot force anybody to take action, but I think there is an opportunity because each and every national society who works on these issues that we've identified today can profile itself and can be an authority in that field, and that is what also helps us to attract funding in the end. So I think there is an interest by all of the movement components to follow up on this.
I have something to add as an idea for the activities which lies in line where the institutional resilience strengthening lies in line with the activity that was suggested by Zara in terms of creating this course or this cross-cutting course that all volunteers and staff can take when they enter to work in the national society, and which creates this basis for all, especially that change starts by acting on the new generation, and then it continues. So if within the new generation we give them this basis of protection, this intersectoral culture of how the different departments can work together, it can be one activity that can be worked on. And in terms of following up on those, I wish that Marwan was here to see whether the Disaster Management Advisory Group can support in that. I can take back the outcomes to Marwan, but I cannot commit or promise anything on his behalf. So, yeah.
I mean, for us as a DRR, I mean, we already agreed that we will work together for the resilience, and it's again for what we came up at the workshop at Kuala Lumpur. So yes, this is something for sure we'll take it.
Final thoughts, reflections for anybody? Mohammed, does it make sense to you? Yeah? Are you happy with some of the key issues that we flagged up coming out of the discussions?
Yes,
yeah?
But from my experience... أحسن. على حسب التجربة أنا أخذت نفس التول على تول VCA واخذته اخذته يعني بلباس الموفمنت واخذته بلباس غير الموفمنت، نفس التولز في نفس الكوميونيتي. يعني لما دخلنا كجمعية وطنية، بمجرد ما دخلنا كجمعية وطنية يعني المجتمعات المحلية عندها انتظارات، وانتظارات هذه تخلق لنا يعني إكراهات، لأنه بمجرد ما ندخل يكون صعب تحقيق الانتظارات. بعدين لما دخلنا من غير لباس الهلال أو الصليب، هناك تقبل يعني سهل أكثر من جمعية وطنية. هذا من خلال التجربة على الأقل في الهلال الأحمر المغربي. نعم.
I mean, part of what we're wanting to do is create that awareness and demand at the community base, but in so doing, it does raise expectations. I mean, we want demand, we want awareness, we want engagement, but that can lead to frustration. If it's a political process. The political powers respond to a demand, so we have to create the demand and awareness. But it's not a responsive system sometimes.
هو المشكلة في تعود المجتمعات المحلية. تقريبا 50 سنة تقريبا، والهلال والصليب يعطي يعني تقريبا مساعدات مادية تقريبا. هذا هو الانتظارات التي تشملها يعني المجتمعات المحلية. وهذه الانتظارات يعني لتغيير يعني التفكير من المجتمعات المحلية، يعني تأخذ من الجمعية الوطنية يعني جهد كبير. وهذا كما قلت من الأول، أنه لو دخلنا بغير جمعية وطنية، يعني اشتغلت بقبعة مثلا اليونيسف أو قبعة UNDP، يعني كان دخول سهل بدون يعني طلب مقابل من نفس المجتمع. اشتغلت في 3 مجتمعات بقبعة الاتحاد وبقبعة الهلال الأحمر ثم بقبعة أخرى، يعني فرق كبير حتى في تقبل المجتمع. المجتمع لما يدخل صليب أو هلال، لأنه تربى على أساس أن الصليب والهلال الأحمر بمجرد ما يدخل يعطي، وهذا إكراه
Yeah.
كبير عندنا في
Yeah.
في الموفمنت.
Yeah. Yeah.
As you mentioned, the community-based approach increase the community expectations and also increase the demands, but also the difficult area how to convince the community what is the difference between the need and the demand. The demand, it is just a wishing list, and the need, it is something else. So this is the real difficulty in the field, how to convince the people what you are requesting. It is a wishing list, it is fine for me. This is demand, but the need is something else. And this need, a series of intervention, analysis, and then to come to this agreement, you will find the conflict of interest and the resources conflict, especially within the conflict context and within the poverty. All of them, they are working, expecting, even if you say hello, they expecting that hello, it means that you will give something. So this is the real difficulty on the field.
So I think as we've mentioned about understanding what the responsibilities or what the mandates are of the different actors, being very clear as to what the mandates, the duties, the responsibilities, both of the different state, non-state institutions, and also the individual. I think we have to be very clear about that as we're starting to, go through this process of engagement, of empowerment, of facilitating. It's clarity on who's providing what, and then the mutual accountability. It's partly about building mutual accountability. I mean, you are going to produce a report coming out of this, and you need to hold your own organization to account for, well, what did we do with this report? We had a great conversation. We had some suggestions coming up. You're saying it's about community-based bottom-up approaches, and here's some ideas going forward. So how are we picking it up as in an organization? We use that report, be comfortable with the recommendations coming out of that report, and use that report to help get the change that you think needs to be done. That this is part of the process. It's a political process again, but accountability. If you want ownership of an agenda, you get greater political ownership and engagement when there is accountability, and that means transparency and clarity on who's doing what. So, yeah. Lady at the back there, and then we're going to have to, it's 4:30, so we're going to have to close there, I'm afraid. But I think it's been a good conversation. But yeah, please.
Hi, thank you. I'm Sumiko from the British Red Cross. Some of this is just thoughts from the top of my head as I've been listening to the past couple of days. But I've said it before earlier today, but we focus so much on traditional community-based DRR, whereas resilience is bigger than that. And I think we've already mentioned institutional resilience, but what about the livelihoods? What about early recovery and the resilience that can be brought in at that side of it as well? And then I know that as a modality, we have cash. And these, I completely agree with Isabel's point that we have to advocate for resilience to donors. But also from a donor perspective, cash, livelihoods, capacity building, DM, all of this stuff is actually, it is actually resilience. A lot of the stuff that we do is resilience. Resilience is just this term that we're now using to capture a lot of the stuff that we already do. And I think we need to remember not to get too tied up with the term. I think it's a very useful term. It makes sure that we have a holistic approach that includes bottom up, top down, everything. But I do think we have to realize that it is just a concept, and that there are bits in there that we do that aren't necessarily traditionally thought of as resilience.
Yep, very, very good comment. One of my own reflections over the last couple of days is are we clear in our own minds what the difference is between a disaster risk management approach and a resilience approach? You know, I'm not sure we're fully understanding what the differences are, you know, and if we're not, then all we're doing is we're adding a new word to the kind of what is already a crowded agenda. You know, we like the word and we think it has some significance, but we're not really sure what. So I think there's a bit more kind of thinking and a bit more guidance needed there. You know, to me, what one of the things resilience does is that, you know, when we get our development processes knocked down, it helps us to understand what the critical priorities are, what is vital, what is important, on what is already a very crowded agenda. You know, we say it's complex, everything is interconnected. So where do we begin? You know, where do we prioritize? What's important? And resilience, you know, helps us to kind of understand what is important, what is critical to sustaining well-being, to sustaining livelihoods. You know, it's not just about how do we prevent the loss and the damage, it's about looking through that and how do we sustain something. What is critical to sustaining this? And it helps us to understand what is important, what to prioritize, what to invest in, and what to support, to nurture, to protect. So, but I think we still need to better understand it, was just my own reflections over the last couple of days. But I'm going to have to close there because we said we'd finish at past. But for me personally, it's been a pleasure to be with you over the last couple of days. It's been my first time in the MENA region. I really feel that you should be at the forefront, and you are at the forefront of understanding what these approaches mean in an area of conflict and insecurity and a very transient populations, forced population movements. And I think you've an awful lot to teach the wider federation, the wider movement. And but it means you do have to capture this, and you do have to kind of, you know, you have to take ownership of this, and you have to lead this, because you know, when I heard that thing, is the MENA region falling behind? I absolutely don't think that is the case. But it's a question of, you know, how is MENA going to lead the federation on these issues? Because this particular region is so sensitive to these issues. So, you know, so I think it's empowering to you to recognize the depth of the experience that you're having. It's highly relevant, and it needs to be shared. And I think that's the value of a networked organization, is recognizing that there's a collective intelligence, but it's a diffuse knowledge in the organization. But it's only as good as you capture it and share it, and it changes practice in other parts of the organization. So you know, keep going, guys, and you're learning a lot, and there's a lot that people can learn from you. And thank you for being part of it for the last couple of days, and I hope you've enjoyed the 2 days. And thank you to the German Red Cross for supporting this and facilitating this, and to the university. It's been great. So well done, all of you. Anyway, thank you. I'll end there. Thank you.
But also to be behind sometimes, to keep the things to be in the right track, you need to be behind to push them in the right track. Yeah, it has also a positive meaning.
Your active participation, and yeah, I really think that we have pinned down some of the critical issues, and that will help us plan for the future, or guide us in planning for the future. For us as German Red Cross, together with the national societies we are working in the region, we have already identified that we want to look into this framework on how to operate in conflict contexts as national societies. Yeah, Kasim?
Yeah, Crescent.
And yeah, for any other participating national society, ICRC Federation, whoever is interested in being part of this, yeah, feel free to contact either Lebanese Red Cross, Kassem, or German Red Cross, Isabel Franzi here. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one last thing. I got requested by Jamal Tamizi from the Palestinian Red Crescent. He wants to say something and...
He wants to give something.
Yes. A token of appreciation.
Nasi Kis.
I'm not sure I pronounced his family name correct.
Jamal.
Okay, so he's giving one for the Lebanese Red Cross for supporting and organizing this. I'm representing them, so I'll be taking it to the Lebanese Red Cross. And also for the German Red Cross, and Franzi is here, or Arno. Decide. And then there's something also for the IFRC, the office here, the local. But I think Sirak would be more than happy to...
If you trust me.
You're all here. We have a video recording that proves this.
Thank you.
We also have something from AEB, but I didn't have the chance to call Yara. I'll call her and we can take it, right? Okay, yalla, I'll give it to them.
And the last one to Noor. This is beautiful.
Thank you. شو عرفك إنه أنا بحب